speakers. We've got Hannah Westoby and Africa Gomez Castillo. They are going to be talking a little bit about the work that's being done through the Environment Agency's ReMeMaRe programme and also some of the work around the carbon code. So Hannah is the technical lead for ReMeMaRe, which is the Restoring Meadows, Marshes and Reefs initiative. And within this role, Hannah coordinates the partnership and the steering group meetings and also manages the project delivery, working closely with a number of government organisations, all leading into the big meeting that is taking place next week. And we also have Africa, who is the Environment Agency's Blue Carbon lead.
Yeah.
So can I remind everyone, please can you make sure that you are muted during the talk? And I will hand over to Hannah.
Cool. Thank you, Jonathan. I'll just get my slides shared. Cool. Hopefully everyone can see those slides. So hello, I'm Hannah Westoby. I am the ReMeMaRe lead within the Environment Agency. I am joined by Africa Gomez Castillo, who leads on the blue carbon side in the same team. We both sit within the Estuary and Coast team within the Environment Agency, and we're very pleased to be here to share with you and present about our restoration initiative, ReMeMaRe. So as a brief talk overview, I will start by introducing to you all what ReMeMaRe is and what it's all about. Then I'll follow on to talk in some detail about some of the achievements ReMeMaRe has completed over the last 6 years. This will include some of more recent pieces of work, of which both Africa and I, as well as the wider team, have been working on. We'll then finish with a bit of a forward look to the year ahead and our upcoming conference. So, first of all, I want to introduce to you the wider ReMeMaRe team, of which ReMeMaRe would not be possible without. So here we all are, and unfortunately, 2 of the ReMeMaRe members highlighted have had to move on to different roles recently, but their legacy is very much still in action. So I felt it really important to include them both here. So we've got Joe and John. They were both part of the programme office in ReMeMaRe. We've got Africa, myself, but also Paula Dobin, who's our programme support, Eve Leegwater, who is our regulatory lead, and we're all headed by Roger Proudfoot, head of Estuaries and Coast. So what is ReMeMaRe? ReMeMaRe stands for Restoring Meadows, Marsh and Reef, pronounced ReMeMaRe, so called as we're remembering what we once had in terms of estuarine and coastal habitats and trying to increase our action to get back towards that. So ReMeMaRe is an ambitious partner-led initiative of which we now have upwards of 45 partners, including environmental NGOs, industry, government, organisations, as well as academics, including representatives from Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. And we all share an ambition to increase restoration activity by 15% by 2043. This ambition and mission is, and these targets are embedded within the Environment Improvement Plan, meaning that we have an annual requirement to report on them. ReMeMaRe was developed 6 years ago now, and over the years has grown in membership and produced various tools and guidance to help partners to restore these 3 main habitats which we focus on: seagrass meadows, saltmarsh and native oyster reef. I will now talk about some of these tools and evidence in a bit more detail. So one of the big questions we tried to answer early on in ReMeMaRe is the how to restore. How do we restore our seagrass or saltmarsh on our native oysters? And we worked with some key partners, including the University of Portsmouth, the Zoological Society of London, and the Native Oyster Network to lead the development of these 3 handbooks pictured here. These handbooks offer a fantastic guide to restoration practitioners to help how to restore these beautiful habitats. Building on this, we then worked with Natural England more recently to develop some marine and coastal habitat restoration principles to support the design and development of restoration projects within our marine environment. And the QR code here will take you to our ECSA website, which ECSA kindly host, and you'll be able to download all these different resources from there. But equally, I will also share the links with Jonathan afterwards, and they can be circulated. So the next question was where to restore. Where can we restore our seagrass, saltmarsh and native oysters across the UK? And to answer this question, the Environment Agency developed some restoration potential layers, also based on outputs from habitat models that predict where would be suitable for restoration. The saltmarsh models were built on from the MMO, Marine Management Organisation layer that was created before. But the Environment Agency developed these further to include these wider habitats in 2019 and 2020. These layers were then refined via we refined them, which included local stakeholder input, and this allowed this is more recently, and this allowed the sites to be identified as sites which are unlikely to be feasible or that are already happening. So those were identified as red, and then those which were not possible in the short term, so in 10-15 years, but they were possible in more longer term, so 15 years plus, and they were identified as amber. And then further on that, we then identify sites which are green, which means that they're feasible in the next 10 to 15 years. This is important to note, though, that these potential layers are just a guide to support restoration planning, and further detailed feasibility studies would absolutely be needed. And they are also not the only place where restoration could happen. So with lots of guidance and tools being put in place in the first few years of ReMeMaRe, the Programme Office was set up in 2024. The primary aim and focus of the programme was on practical restoration on the ground. And this included a development of the project pipeline, which is a pipeline of restoration projects, and exploring funding opportunities to deliver this pipeline and restoration on the ground. So the restoration, the pipeline was initiated last year, and we have now 66 projects which are contained within that pipeline, which essentially is a spreadsheet, but a long list of projects which are both of restoration, creation, as well as nursery facilities. So all different aspects of restoration, of which are needed for us to scale up our action on the ground. A total of this would then total 50.5 million into the future that's required in funding to deliver all those projects, which kind of, in a second, it kind of demonstrates the demand we have for funding for restoration across the UK. So when you split this down into habitats, the 66 projects cover 13 seagrass sites, which is covering 2.5 kilometres squared of seagrass restoration, 34 saltmarsh, which is equivalent to 20 kilometres of area of saltmarsh, 12 seascape projects, so multiple habitat projects, which is 2.15 kilometres squared, and 2 native oyster habitats. This pipeline is, as I said, has been open a year, and it is continually growing. So we kind of actively ask people and partners to be putting in projects to the pipeline to really demonstrate this continual demand of restoration. So so the projects have been submitted from both our ReMeMaRe partners directly, but also through the Environment Agency catchment coordinators. And it really shows that the number of projects which are dependent on funding. The other side of the programme was to help fund these projects and explore additional funding. And last year, we were able to fund £1 million towards 14 projects through our Water Environment Improvement Fund, or WEEF. This map shows the different locations around the country which received ReMeMaRe WEEF funding. And this included a whole variety of different projects, from seagrass planting in Helford Estuary and the Humber Estuary to innovative beneficial reuse work on the south coast. This year, we have secured an additional 1.5 million through this WEEF, ReMeMaRe WEEF pot. And we hope to continue some of these projects which were started last year, as well as some of the new projects too, and they'll be announced soon. Of course, we need to seek additional funding to meet that demand that I originally showed, that 50 million, and we are continuing to explore ways to do this. So throughout our first 6 years, we have produced several key pieces of guidance that I've just shown you here today to support our memory partners and restoration community to deliver restoration, which is fantastic. And now we are also delivering restoration through memory on the ground directly. And so much fantastic is happening out there. However, knowing where it's all happening is extremely difficult, and it makes it extremely difficult for us to report on the target each year. And it's also difficult for people to collaborate and work together when they don't know what's happening, even on their doorstep sometimes. So it becomes extremely tricky unless you're actively involved. So that's where I'd like to introduce to you all a new online platform we have been developing, the Marine Enhancement Directory, or MEND for short. This is the UK's central repository for estuarine, coastal and offshore habitat creation and restoration projects. It's been funded jointly between the Crown Estate, Environment Agency and the Natural Capital Ecosystem Assessment Programme. And we've been working with ReMeMaRe and Logic Software to develop this over the last few years. We've been developing it since 2023 and have gone through multiple stages, which are displayed here. This included, to start, a review of the existing platforms or databases that exist, and then continued to stakeholder engagement last year to find out exactly what our partners, including regulators, restoration practitioners, and industry, want out of this platform. Which then led, that was kind of in my head, like the recipe in a way, which then led us to the build phase, which we are currently in. We have taken all the feedback, the wish list, if you like, and prioritized this list into what will form our minimum viable product. We're excited to be launching this initial build next week at the ReMeMaRe conference. And if you're interested, we're asking for people to get in touch, and we'll be adding you to a mailing list where we'll share more updates in future. So a bit more about the MEND platform. So it's going to be the UK's central repository of estuarine, coastal and offshore habitat creation and restoration projects. There is no, at the moment, there is no central repository that exists that does this, and it's going to be freely accessible. It's going to include past, present and planned activities which aim to restore, create, recover or enhance the marine environment. And it will be covering from the highest astronomical tide out to 200 nautical miles to really capture everything salty within it. It will help encourage a collaboration, make data information about projects more accessible, including both the successes and the failures, the things that didn't work so well. It will allow us to report against national and international targets and commitments more easily. And also it will allow us to support marine spatial planning. I haven't got the final thing, which we will be launching next week, but here are some of the screenshots of what it might be looking like. And just to flag that we really are keen for it. We'll be having, instead of just point files, which you can see here for different, as an example, we'll be having sorry, I can see chats coming up. It will be polygon data for every project which is entered into the platform. And when we launch next week, we'll be asking people to be entering their projects into the Marine Enhancement Directory, so we can really start building the picture of what we're doing collectively across the UK. So that's a bit about MEND. And then lastly, before I move on, I want to just talk about a recently updated resource, the UK Estuaries Guide, which is a free resource of baseline data regarding all estuaries in England. It is the core information which is fundamental to the planning stages of restoration, and of which is so important is up to date as possible, which is why we recently worked with ReMeMaRe to fund through the Natural Capital Ecosystem Assessment Programme to update this Estuaries Guide to ensure the data is as accurate as possible. The Estuaries Guide consists of 3 elements: a website, the Estuaries Guide, a data viewer, a mapping platform, and a database itself. All of which, again, is freely accessible for everyone to access. And the most recent updates involved us remodeling and calculating the different values that estuaries have across England. And so I welcome you, and I'll share this. I'll also share this link with you afterwards as well. So that's kind of some of the work we've been doing over the last 6 years. It doesn't do it justice. There's plenty more that I could talk about, but these are just some of the key things we wanted to share with you today. And now we're going on to some work which Eve Leake also leads on, about enabling restoration through policy and regulation, which is one of our themes of ReMeMaRe. So what we're hearing is that the regulatory processes such as marine licensing, environmental planning are slowing and in some cases preventing restoration activity altogether. The complexity of the process to get through the application, the time it takes to get the consent, the cost which can sometimes take a significant proportion of projects to fund. However, we need good marine regulation. Habitat restoration projects can be complex, and especially if we are delivering at scale, we know it's needed. They cannot be assumed to be low risk, even though they are improving the environment. From impacts on biodiversity to introduction of non-invasives to even planting things in the wrong areas, it could all lead to unintended consequences, which could actually undermine future restoration activity. So despite this, we acknowledge that change is needed to better support these sorts of activities if we're going to upscale restoration activity to support our ambitious habitats. Our ambitious targets, sorry. We need an enabling and regulatory and licensing process, which is why we have set up a policy and regulation group, which is led by DEFRA and supported by the Marine Management Organisation, Environment Agency and Natural England. And it has links to the other devolved administrations in the UK. The group considers how activities of significant environmental benefit, such as habitat restoration, could be better supported, and seek and trial solutions to help streamline regulation and evolve policy. So from this, the recommendations that have been proposed so far include all of these. So one of which, the Marine Licensing Case Review, which is at top, will be presented by Adam Tillotson at ReMeMaRe next week via a poster. So I encourage you all to please go and find out about that, because that review has taken place and the results he will be showcasing at ReMeMaRe. Included, in addition to that, there is also recommendations such as seeking marine license subsidies for restoration work, seeking opportunities for low risk activities to go within a self-service category, and developing local seascape restoration plans that define suitable restoration activities pre-agreed with Natural England to try and speed up this process. And that brings me on to one of those recommendations, which is the marine licensing consultation, which we welcome you all to have your say. And this is the DEFRA are seeking views on proposed changes to the fees around marine licenses, as well as the list of activities which are exempt, to add to the 5 which are new exemptions, and to remove some existing exemptions, and to also add 2 new self-serve licenses. So please, we'll share this afterwards as well. Please do have your say and submit some questions to this consultation. That's all from me. I'll now pass over to my colleague Africa. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. So before I start talking to you about all the work that the Environment Agency will be doing on blue carbon, what is blue carbon? So the IPCC, or Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, defines blue carbon as the organic carbon stored in coastal and marine habitats that can be managed to increase carbon sequestration or prevent greenhouse gas emissions. So this means that coastal and marine ecosystems, they're all blue carbon ecosystems. And some of them, like seagrass and saltmarsh, through their vegetation, they sequester carbon by photosynthesis. And this carbon is not only stored on the plant, but it's also stored in adjacent sediments. So the Environment Agency recognized this mitigation potential on blue carbon ecosystems, and for the last 2 or 3 years, with the help of some funding from DEFRA, we've been focusing on two different strategies. So the first one is the inclusion of Saltmarshes into the UK greenhouse gas inventory. And the second one is the development of the UK Saltmarsh code. If you click on the next one, please, Hannah. So we have decided to focus most of our efforts in the blue carbon world into Saltmarshes for the only reason that when we had our scope back in 21, we realized that this is the ecosystem with more data for the UK. So we are trying to pretty much set the path with Saltmarshes to then follow that one with different ecosystems. And we're doing this by commissioning different evidence projects that will help us reduce the knowledge gap and will enable us to include these ecosystems into accounting exercises. So this is a few of the projects that we have been developing and are actually still developing. So the first one, and they are in no particular order, the first one, the greenhouse gas and carbon flux database, was led by UKCH, and this is a report describing the systematic literature review to gather all the data and information that we have for the UK on greenhouse gas fluxes and carbon stocks for natural and restored saltmarshes. This report is ready, and we are in the process of publishing it with DEFRA. We also have a following project to this, which is visualizing that database. So the idea is to create an open source, pretty much living database that will be public. Any user could see it, could go to the website, look at a map, and then visualize all the data with geographic points. And you will be able to download, you will be able to distinguish between natural and restored saltmarshes. And more important for the longevity of this database is that users are going to be able to suggest new data sets or new papers that we can look into to incorporate to the database. And hopefully this will be ready this year, 2025. This is also going to help us with a third report, which is developing emissions factors. So these are crucial to include saltmarshes into the UK greenhouse gas inventory, which is tracking the country's progress on climate goals. And these projects will help us understand if we have sufficient data to submit Tier 1 emissions factors, which are just the IPCC guidelines for wetlands, or if we have enough data to produce emissions factors on Tier 2, which is a very more country-specific ones. This is in progress. We're still UKCH is still incorporating the latest feedback that we have. So again, hopefully be ready this year. Another project that we've been working, it is finished and it was led by Jacobs, is on the countable carbon review, and this is more linked to the Saltmarsh code. It was divided in two. The first was a technical input, which pretty much developed a method to estimate operational carbon emissions from construction and maintenance of managed realignment projects. So managed realignment is the most common use method from the Environment Agency to restore or create saltmarshes in the country. And we had another project that Manchester Metropolitan University led that pretty much determined an appropriate UK relevant value for organic carbon for this project so that we can account and deduct what is, so the carbon these projects accumulate and store. Some of that carbon will arrive to the ecosystem even if we don't intervene and we don't do anything. So we shouldn't be counting this carbon, and we also shouldn't be counting the carbon that the plant cannot assimilate, because maybe we take a sample and when we measure carbon, but not all of that could be break down by the plant in a store. So we shouldn't be counting that either. We also have another report that was done by Jacobs, which is more for a user guide, sort of for the Saltmarsh code. So users could look at it and then realize if their project is more of a high, medium, or low complexity. So they could look at the potential carbon emissions and carbon credits that they could get from there. So this is for making it easier for people who is new to this world of creating salt marshes can look at the different past projects and try to see, because we know that carbon would not fund completely projects, but if you have a high complexity project, maybe you can look into other type of credits to get the funding that you need. And these reports that are linked to the Saltmarsh code, the ones that we have ready, we haven't published them because we are looking into if we would be sensitive to intellectual property in terms of the Saltmarsh code. Next one, please, Hannah. Another project, a very interesting one, if you ask me, that we are involved is the Flux Tower Network. So the Environment Agency is part of this initiative to monitor UK saltmarsh ecosystems and the role in climate mitigation. So through the Marine Natural Capital Ecosystem Assessment, or Marine NCA, I normally never say the whole name, we acquire and install 4 flux towers to measure CO2 and methane in both natural and restored saltmarsh habitats. And at the moment, our carbon flux network, it has 6 towers, and hopefully soon we will be adding a 7th one in Scotland. So these flux towers are using the eddy covariance method, which is, I can hear someone. A technique used to measure how much greenhouse gases, in this case CO2 and methane, is moving between the saltmarsh, so the land surface, and the atmosphere. And over time, we're going to use this data to help develop those emissions factors that I spoke before. And hopefully, once the saltmarshes are included in the inventory, this could unlock more funding opportunities for restoration, habitat creation, and protection of these habitats. And at the moment, we only have 1 year of data for the flux towers, which we know is not enough. We need more years of data so we can account for interannuality and all these variables that can be affecting the sequestration. But early data that we have at the moment implies that saltmarshes are net sinks of CO2 and methane. And we also have one of the flux towers in managed realignment that is actually being developed at the moment, which is in our moors. So this would be the first ever measurement of greenhouse gas emissions real time while all the managed realignment is in process and while we are seeing the Saltmarsh then republish this land. Next one, please, Hannah. And in terms of the second strategy, so the Saltmarsh code, at the moment in the UK, if you wanted to offset carbon emissions, you can only follow either the woodland carbon code or the peatland code. So we are developing a voluntary certification standard to attract private funding for saltmarsh habitat creation and restoration. And at the moment, this saltmarsh code is currently being developed for managed realignment projects and for carbon. This is only because that's what the scientific evidence is telling us, but we are developing in a way that we can leave space for other type of credits like nutrients biodiversity in the future, and also to explore different habitats to also follow the same path and create their own code. Next one, Hannah, please. So at the moment, we have finished the second phase of developing, and we have a roadmap that we think will get us to have a live code by summer 26. But first of all, we need to complete the development of the code and all the documentation. We need to establish the management of the code. So we need to have a technical advisory board. We need to get together our terms of references, and we need to have the intellectual property on its place. We also need to create an internal registry before we can submit our carbon units to the UK Land Carbon Registry. And we need to also have an online presence. We're going to develop a website so everyone can go and check and even have submit questions or anything related to the Saltmarsh code. And we are doing this also at the same time being careful to align with other UK initiatives like the BSI Flex standards, and also the inclusion of the Saltmarshes into the greenhouse inventory, which, like you say, is very related to all of this. Like one project could give us information for both of the two strategies. And lastly, and I think very important, because we have got this from different partners from ReMeMaRe, is that we need to know how stacking is going to work, because we know that the Saltmarsh code is not going to fund everything. So how is it going to work with biodiversity net gain or marine net gain and all of these? So we need to potentially do a scope on this and how can they work together. And I think that's all for me.
Thanks, Africa. And just to finish, this is our last slide. Just a bit of a pitch, really, for ReMeMaRe conference next week. So it's the 9th, 10th of July in Scarborough. And we're hoping to book the sun for next week. So we're in a sunny Scarbados. But we have a few in-person tickets remaining, but appreciate it's very late notice. And we've only got a few days left. So we have plenty of online tickets. So this year, thanks to the Crown Estates, we are going online. So if you cannot attend in person, we really welcome you to join it online. This year's themes include Source to Sea, Restoration and Action, Restoration Science, Value and Enabling Restoration, Empowering Communities, and Cultural Heritage focus session as well. So we're really looking forward to it, and I hope we can see some of you there next week. But yeah, that's all from us, and open to questions. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you both. Really interesting talks, and lots of excellent resources and things that I look forward to exploring and being part of. If there are any questions, please feel free to raise your hand or put them in the chat. I've seen there's a couple of things in the chat already. What I will say now is that once Hannah has sent me the resources highlighted in the talk, I will put them on our website. So our website hosts a lot of the ReMeMaRe documents and resources. So they'll be there on our website and also within the webinars section of the website as well. And of course, the recording is available through the website and on our YouTube page as well. Great. Well, if there are any questions, please feel free to raise your hand. I can see there is a question in the chat already, which is about the conference program and when it's going to be finalised.
So it still says draft. It probably will say draft until Monday, but to say that it's pretty much final. I mean, there might be one or two tweaks if people's, but I think treat it as final, Marina, for timings and everything. Yeah.
Great. And Alice, your hand's up.
Hiya, it was just a question on the Marine Enhancement Directory. Is it just going to be based on seagrass, saltmarsh and oysters, or will it be based on all habitats? Because previously I've done quite a lot of work into tidying artificial rock pools, for example. So would that be a useful thing to include? Yeah,
no, absolutely. It's covering, although ReMeMaRe is focused on those refocused habitats, the directory will be covering all marine enhancements activities. So absolutely, the artificial rock pools that you mentioned will be perfect. Thank you.
Thank
you. Great. I thought I saw another hand go up, but it maybe has been put down again. In that case, while people are still thinking, did someone say something?
I think Francisco's just popped his hand up, John. It was me that had it, but I popped it in chat. I think Francisco's now up.
Okay, perfect.
Hi, sorry. I joined in late and missed most of it. Sorry, I've been driving like a nut to get to somewhere so I can park and listen. I work with oyster reefs based in Portugal. I'm was basically an oyster farmer, but we've developed a reef system that's sort of a cross between what we do to produce oysters and what a reef can and should be. It's sort of a hybrid. It's not something, I think it's not something you'll come across normally. It's kind of weird. But we're working with the cement industry and the paper mill industry to implement this reef system. And cement industry needs carbon credits. The paper mill industry needs to offset all the junk they put into the water. But what I'm really having difficulty here, and I've researched and I've looked, and is finding the parameters I need, the correct parameters that show what I offset, what exactly I need to measure. Along the lines, I think it's similar to what biocredits will come up or will become in the near future. And you all work with in this area, so I'm guessing, I'm hoping you'll be a lot more familiar with this with these parameters than I am. So I'm asking for help to develop well, a system that basically will benefit everybody else as well. Because I don't know, can anyone shed some light or ideas of what I should be looking into or who I should be talking to get some definite parameters that are of actual value to everybody?
Africa, do you want to?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna put my email on the chat so we can set up a call, because part of the Saltmarsh code will include what we call MRB, which is monitoring, reviewing, and verification. So in there will be a whole list of what would you need to be monitoring. In this case, specifically for salt marshes and carbon, but that could potentially give you an idea of what would you need, at least for carbon.
Yes, all information is welcome. Since we're starting a bit from scratch, it's a very strange, well, it's a mudflat ecosystem. Mm-hmm. But I'll be very happy to look into that, and I'll know you if I have further questions, if that's okay.
No, that's fine.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. Are there any further questions?
If I may.
Yeah, go on, Tanya.
It might be a bit tangential, but I was just wondering if there's any discussion around supporting the nature evidence from baseline in the same way as carbon is being supported from baseline by flux towers, etc. So I popped a question in the chat. I understand there's Natural England have provided some large volume sampling and some small volume sampling for eDNA at protected sites around the coast, but I understand also that it would be helpful to have fixed points for large volume sampling to be continuous, to provide a consistency and replicability to show benefit. I was wondering if that has been raised as part of evidence towards the benefit of ReMeMaRe and perhaps additional funding 2030, etc. Thank you.
I don't know who wants to answer that question.
Is this in addition to carbon monitoring? Do you mean, Tanya, like regular repeat monitoring to show the benefits? So I think obviously monitoring of restoration and what we do after is extremely important, and funding for that needs to be embedded in any funding allocation. So I guess the specifics around what we should monitor, I agree though, some sort of standardized approach will be extremely important to allow us to compare projects. I don't think we're at that point yet where we have those metrics where we can say this is what needs to happen or needs to be monitored, but I think we can we should be all kind of thinking along those lines in terms of what is needed to be monitored. I know at the recent Seascape conference, they had a whole day dedicated to talk about metrics in terms of what of our metrics we should monitor to kind of track connectivity and in our seascape. So I think those conversations definitely need to happen and are happening in some cases. So yeah, I guess it's a conversation we should carry on and
Thank you, Hannah. I'd love to carry it on. That was completely amazing talk. I'm so pleased. Thanks for explaining.
No worries, thanks, Tanya.
Great, thank you. Mike is next.
Thanks, Jonathan, and thanks, Hannah and Africa. My apologies, I was 15 minutes late joining the previous meeting overran. But interestingly, the previous meeting links to one of my comments, in that at the moment all over Europe there are many projects being written because in the recent Horizon Europe emissions calls, restoration is in quite a few of the topics. Now, the Environment Agency and Roger Proudfoot might have mentioned this to Hannah, the EA is involved in one of those projects on restoration that we're putting together, and if we're successful, then that will at least give a lot more funding for some of the work. And IX, that I'm one of the directors of, we're at the moment in 5 of these European projects, but actually we're busy writing another, helping to write another 6. So people online should really think about, are there these other avenues of funding for that? As for the last comments there about indicators and monitoring, indicators and monitoring is not rocket science. We've got directories now of, I think there's one directory of 500 biodiversity indicators. We know what the monitoring is. We know what monitoring should be. We've got monitoring schemes that I guess many of us have been working on over the years. But the biggest challenge, and I think it was touched on just now, probably by Hannah, in that what we see in the UK is we see funding has been obtained by hook or by crook, and sometimes it's by crook, but funding's been obtained for doing the restoration. But then there's it's the follow-up afterwards, the following it through, the looking at the way the restoration sites have been changed, or whether they've worked at all. I mean, we've got sites on the Humber that worked in the short term and created the habitat we wanted, but then after a few years they didn't work, and by then people have moved on to other things. So I think what we have to focus on is making sure we've not only got the funding for doing the restoration, but that follow-up as well. And as many of you know, this old adage that once you start managing systems, you have to keep managing them, because otherwise they revert to things that you don't want. And then the final point, just to take, I think Africa touched on this, is that when we're looking at carbon storage, carbon credits and so on, I think sometimes we overestimate the carbon storage, because what we do is we start merging the labile and the refractory carbon, whereas actually it's just the long stored carbon that become important, because many of these habitats, such as saltmarsh and reed beds and seagrasses, a lot of the carbon is just turned over. It goes into the detrital pool and fuels the rest of the system. So it's trying to get into the habit of saying, are we looking at the long-term refractory carbon, or are we looking at the short-term labile carbon? And I think if we put those in, what actually happens is we get better estimates of the sort of thing that Africa was thinking about. So that's just some of the comments, but my apologies, Hannah, for missing the first 15 minutes of your talk.
That's okay, Mike. Thank you.
Do you have anything you want to say back to Mike? Any responses?
I do. Yeah, I mean, that's what the countable carbon study tried to pretty much estimate it. Like differentiate between autochthonous and allochthonous, liable and reliable, yeah, all of that, and try to get an estimation for the UK. So that's what we needed first, all the database to try to see, because so much is different if we're talking about south, west, east in the UK. So yeah, trying to figure out if an estimation would work for the whole country, if we should have different estimations according to areas and regions. Yeah, that's what we tried to address in there. And then also on terms of time, at the moment, we have information that we could probably predict the storage for the first 20 years of the after the mandatory alignment had happened. But actually, we should be looking at 100 years. What happens during all this time? How does the accumulation rates change along all of this time? So yes, I think, well, what we need is just decades of data, pretty much, to actually calculate everything correctly.
That's right. Yeah, you're right, Africa. I mean, we have a paper that's under review at the moment, led by Gordon Watson down at Portsmouth. And again, that's looking at some of these, what are these main questions that we have to try and answer? And are we getting there? And again, as I mentioned just now, keep an eye out for a lot of the other European work we're doing. We're in danger, and some of you have heard me say this before, we're in danger of the UK of becoming insular. We're busy looking at what we're doing, but the fact that I think everything that you and Hannah have made is the subject of other European projects that groups like us are involved in those European projects, but some of the we are in danger of missing them, sort of thing. So that's good. Thanks anyway. That's great.
Yeah, and some of the data that is on the database literature review that UKCH did actually found out that some of the Saltmarsh ecosystems in the north of Europe, like north of Spain, north of France, actually they are very similar to our South England ones. So they also including them. So on the map and all the literature review, they're going to be there because they are very similar. So yes, we did look in the literature review to the north of Europe.
That's good. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Last call for any questions. If not, I will say thank you once again to Hannah and Africa. Really, really great talks, and best of luck next week with the ReMeMaRe conference as well. That's our final webinar from this block of talks. We're going to take a break for the summer, and our next talk will be on the 4th of September. So a short summer break, and then we're back for some talks during the autumn. Tanya has just jumped in with a final question of, may I ask EA if compensation will run separately? I don't know if we want to quickly answer that question before we finish.
Do you mean separately to ReMeMaRe?
Separately to enhancement. Is the compensation program envisaged to run legally as it similarly as it currently does?
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, that's correct. It will carry on as it is. We hope to. We do work closely with Will Manning, who's the Habitat Compensated Restoration lead. But it will be a separate thing. But we hope to kind of join up that restoration bit where possible.
Thank you.
So yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's really helpful.
Great, thank you, Tanya, and thank you once again to our speakers. And I will see you all soon. And Alice, we will see you all soon in the autumn. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.